Welcome to the Standards Michigan Weekly Focus Teleconference, where the doors open to discuss the week's work, but we also expand upon the underlying philosophy and strategy that guides that work. We schedule these open teleconferences at a time when the work week winds down and when we do more reflective discussions that don't crowd out the regular production calendars. What we do to write code and get votes in the middle part of the week. As I like to say, code writing and writing code and getting votes is what we do to pay the rent. We always prefer that these Friday teleconferences be more of a discussion than a lecture, but absent any real-time participants, we always have a focus topic, usually chosen from the stream of standards action that we follow on a near hourly basis. We record them, and we do post almost all of them on our YouTube channel. We get about 25 views per week, enough we think to meet an obligation to be open, transparent, and accessible, as well as open to challenges to our priorities. This week, during our Open Door Friday teleconference, we will let the subject of international standards be the backdrop for our informal discussions for the third time since June 19th. Rather than a specific focus on a standards action, our focus will be more of a reflection on the United States' stature in international standards development, as well as the stature of other nations and the impact of international standards development and education and innovation and advancing technologies in the world. Before we begin the discussion, let me first introduce who's on our call today. We have Mike Toner out of LA. Hello, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
And of course, we have myself and Christine here at the University of Michigan. So with that, I am going to turn the call over to Christine. Go ahead, Christine, it's your airplane.
Thank you, Mike. We are continuing our coverage of international standards with this third installment. Our two previous teleconferences received good viewership, and we understand and recognize that this subject matter is of heightened interest as the United States continues to operate in an ever-expanding and competitive global economy. The impact of this reality can be felt within the education facilities industry and beyond. We paused this week to focus on a discussion about the landscape of the international standards arena and the United States' place in it. We will see that this landscape has implications for the education industry, the role of the user-owner final fiduciary in the standards development process, and the United States' economic interests as a whole. Through the American National Standards Institute, the United States has immediate access to the International Standards Organization, ISO, standards development processes. First, let's review the mission of the ISO with this short video.
Today's world is full of challenges for business, government, and society. Facing up to these challenges requires leadership and vision. But leaders also need practical tools they can rely on. ISO standards help CEOs achieve their business objectives and provide governments and regulators with vital technical support. ISO's voluntary standards draw on a wealth of experience and expertise, are developed in partnership with government, business, and consumers, tackling the environmental, economic, and societal challenges of sustainable development. ISO provides a forum for cooperation and consensus, developing standards through the people that need them, implement them, and are affected by them. Standards help create growth, open up global markets, facilitate trade, reduce risks, and ensure that developing countries share in the benefits. ISO provides the tools to tackle challenges like climate change, sharing innovation, improving performance, and increasing energy efficiency. Standards help build partnerships, increase customer satisfaction, and ensure quality, making the world a more productive, creative, and safer place. Leaders count on ISO. With over 60 years of experience, a network of standards bodies in 163 countries acting globally and locally. More than 18,000 standards for nearly every aspect of technology and business. ISO tackles the issues that keep leaders awake at night by working hard on global solutions to global challenges. Today, tomorrow, and for the future.
Through ANSI, the United States has a robust level of participation in the international standards development process, and this would, in part, be true. Part of ANSI's responsibilities as the U.S. member body to the ISO includes accrediting U.S. technical advisory groups, or TAGs, U.S. TAGs. The primary purpose of these groups is to develop and transmit, via ANSI, United States positions on activities and ballots of the technical committees, and as appropriate subcommittees and policy committees. These technical issues include the approval, reaffirmation, revision, and withdrawal of ISO standards. The University of Michigan is reviewing our interest in becoming a U.S. TAG on a few ISO standards in our effort to engage more fully in the international standards development process on behalf of the education facilities industry. For a closer analysis of the role of the United States in international standards development, we will be taking a look at the role of technical committees at the ISO. But first, the ANSI website explains that ISO standards are developed by these technical committees, which are comprised of experts from the industrial, technical, and business sectors, which have asked for the standards, and which subsequently put them to use. These experts may be joined by others with relevant knowledge, such as representatives of government agencies, testing laboratories, consumer associations, environmentalists, academic circles, and so on. The experts participate as national delegations chosen by the ISO National Member Institute, which is for the U.S. ANSI, for the other countries concerned as well. These delegations are required to represent not just the views of the organizations in which their participating experts work, but of other stakeholders too. According to ISO rules, the Member Institute is expected to take account of the views of the range of parties interested in the standard under development and to present a consolidated national consensus position to the technical committee. We are then to assume that balanced participation does occur, and we recognize that there is good effort for this to happen. Yet there is some argument to be had that there is not full participation among the user-owner final fiduciary through ANSI, hence the existence of this advocacy enterprise, Standards Michigan. At Standards UMich is following numerous standards issues that impact the education, academic, healthcare industries, which are under review at the ISO. These issues range from energy management systems and sustainable development in communities to education organization management systems and an international standard for healthcare administration. We recognize that the participation of ANSI standard developers via ISO technical committees has been instrumental in advancing the interests of U.S. stakeholders. There has been some participation by educational institutions, and that participation does provide valuable input to this process. For example, in May 2008, Georgia Tech Enterprise Innovation Institute, it's part of Georgia Institute of Technology, and Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratories developed a proposal on behalf of the U.S. Department of Energy and the American National Standards Institute to develop an international energy management system standard. This proposal, which you can see on the screen, was accepted by the ISO Technical Management Board, and the U.S. and Brazil provided primary leadership for this effort. ISO 5001 was published in record time, under 3 years, and the work of TC, or Technical Committee 242, garnered a lot of recognition. Just to take a closer look at this particular ISO standard, we have another short video.
How we face up to the world's energy challenges will heavily influence the future we leave for our children. Developing and deploying technologies for new and renewable energy sources can take time, but organizations can achieve immediate benefits by improving the way they manage energy. Improved energy efficiency can cut costs, conserve resources, and contribute to reducing global warming. The new ISO 50001 standard for energy management systems can help safeguard our future by making a positive difference in the here and now. When it comes to energy management, confidence has a nickname that's recognized worldwide. Now you know it too. It's ISO.
In early 2015, the University of Michigan participated in the markup of the next version of this ISO standard. This is yet one example of the over 200 issues Standards Michigan monitors, which impacts the education and academic healthcare industries throughout the given calendar year. We like to see the participation of other academic institutions in standards development, and we know that this formula of contributing at the work point of standards development issues contributes to the mission of ANSI. But the challenge is that greater participation is needed on behalf of the education industry via the user-owner final fiduciary. We believe this is of concern because we can take a look at the United States Technical Committee participation at the ISO, and we can see that the U.S. is actually lagging behind some other member countries in total technical committee membership. One can suggest that this is cause for concern because of the somewhat subtle, under-the-radar, yet powerfully directive role standards development plays in the global economy and global competitiveness. Let's take a look at what those technical committee numbers are. As you can see on this chart, we have France at number 1 with the most technical committee memberships, and rounding out the top 20 is Austria. Towards the latter part of the pack is the United States with 615 technical committee memberships. So we can see that the United States ranks 15th and has about 100 less committee memberships than the top 5. We can also ask ourselves, what are these implications? Are there any particular reasons? We can provide some analysis of these facts and suggest some implications for the United States. ANSI President and CEO Joe Bhatia has stated, standards and conformity assessment activities are inseparably linked to all facets of our national economy and are vital to the continued global competitiveness of our national economy. They influence an estimated 80% of global merchandise trade, or about $13 trillion. Like I've said, while one could suggest that the United States has a dominant presence in standards development internationally, there are some observations that our position is not as strong as it could be to advance our best interests in global competition. In particular, we can see that the ever-growing economy that China has also has one of the largest committee membership numbers. So in addition to dominance in technical committee memberships, China also has over 30 universities that offer standards education curricula. In contrast, the United States has approximately 5. Catholic University in Washington, D.C. is one of them. And there's a lecturer there who has presented on this subject of standards education, most recently at SES. And his name is Donald Purcell. He's the recognized expert in strategic relationships concerning globalization, international standardization, and strategic standards education initiatives. And he was quoted as saying, standards form a bridge to the future between technology and users. Whoever controls the bridge controls the future. Another individual who has written on this subject is Rebecca Fannin. She's author of Silicon Dragon, How China is Winning the Tech Race. She was quoted in an article as saying, at Nanchang University in southeastern China, the founder of Lattice Power Corporation showed her how he was cranking out newfangled lights that promised to replace standard bulbs. Over a Chinese box of lunch at his Shanghai high-rise headquarters, the chairman and CEO of Suntech Power Holdings, the world's largest producer of solar panels, told her he holds 11 patents for producing lower-cost solar panels. Rebecca went on to write, China is leapfrogging past a legacy of outdated formats that stymie Western firms. Because of the size and stature of China's markets, such innovations could set world standards for technology. I asked the question, could it be that China is cultivating a cadre of technical experts to shepherd standards development efforts and shape technologies in their national interests? You can turn to another quote from President and CEO of ANSI, Joe Bhatia, who provided in written testimony to the United States House of Representatives Committee on Science, Space, and Technology in 2012, stating, A big problem we face in the global market is that all too often standards are used as barriers by other nations. Emerging markets such as China and India are creating hundreds, even thousands, of new standards and product requirements each year. Most are created by government with limited industry input. These comments and observations are not necessarily new. However, the advocacy effort at the University of Michigan may be a new approach to leveraging the capability in the United States. The standards advocacy enterprise at the University of Michigan is operating at what we might label the micro as well as macro level of standards advocacy. Today we've looked more at the macro level. Our mostly uncompensated technical experts are active at the work point or micro level in affecting standards development with ANSI's SDOs, which is also where the cost savings can be found for the education facilities industry, which is the main purpose, the main mission of our efforts at Standards Michigan. It has been documented that participation of the U.S. user owner is less than other incumbents active with ANSI SDO. We could theorize then that because other countries' standards development organizations are funded by their governments, they have a more balanced and perhaps even more compensatory level of participation. By monitoring the global engagement of the international standards development, we are suggesting that the lack of participation of the user owner nationally could likely affect the U.S. international representation on ISO technical committees as well. We continue to seek ways to engage the end user owner final fiduciary in the standards development process so that all interests are fully represented. Not only is this in the economic interest of the education facilities industry, it could potentially add to the existing U.S. Technical Committee participation with ANSI SDOs as well as with the ISO. It's representation of ANSI on the ISO. We know that there are some practical and economic barriers for fully balanced participation despite the best intentions of ANSI and others. One could suggest that this creates a competitive disadvantage for the United States in the global standards arena. Technology innovation and global competitiveness. So to summarize, if the public user interest is not fully represented in the ANSI process, then the United States is not leveraging all of its resources in the standards development process. While it can be suggested that the producer and enforcer is well represented, it is the user that also needs to be fully engaged. However, in the United States, as we've said, the user's involvement in standards development is not typically compensated. This is different than our counterparts throughout the world in which a government agency is the lead for standards development. Government funds all interested parties in the SD process, and the national interest is the driving factor. The level of involvement on ISO technical committees varies from country to country. We've established that. But worth noting, again, is the variation in the number of technical memberships a country possesses. Certainly the United States is very involved and a substantive participant. One can suggest that the greater number of technical committees that are involved, then consequently the more influence a particular country has on the standards development process. As Joe Bhatia, who will be here in Ann Arbor, Michigan next Friday to present, has stated, get involved in standards or your competitors will make decisions for you.
Thanks very much, Christine. That was very good. Thanks very much. It really lays out the broad contours of the problem that lies ahead. Is there anything else on your Prezi here, or is that the end of it?
That was the end of the Prezi. I'm just going to flip over to our website.
Okay, good. So while you're doing that, I thought I'd enlighten a few of your statements there. The 50,001 standard, yes, it was inspired by the Department of Energy and Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech had been approached by the DOE. As many of you may know, that there are limits. Our Constitution says what the government cannot do. And so among them, as a refinement of that, the National Technology Transfer and Advancement Act and OMB Circular A19, both of which have been covered fairly well on our site, restrains federal agencies, but it's still those agencies like DOE is allowed to participate. And so they approached Georgia Tech as kind of a convening collaborative party from academia to advance the federal government's interest primarily in energy conservation. Now, I would argue that even though it is with Georgia Tech, that it tends to, Georgia Tech, the division of Georgia Tech which is involved is not the user owner final fiduciary. Background on the terminology, probably have to go through our website, but when we refer to incumbent interest, we refer to manufacturers, insurance, and labor and enforcement. When we refer to the user owner final fiduciary, those are the people that are, those are the organizations or enterprises within an organization like ours and others that are trying to reconcile the competing priorities of safety and economy. We find that there's a very large cadre or even a spirit of the times, I like to say zeitgeist within our industry, that is green. And so if there's a green agenda being advanced, it's very difficult for the end user, the business enterprises within our industry, to compete with, to get its voice fully heard, because frankly, very often the business culture and the education, the academic culture are at odds on a number of key points. And so we're very careful with our language, because while the business side supports the academic side, sometimes there are some excesses on the academic side that are associated with green, what we call green overreach. Okay, that much said, it turns out that almost all ISO standards are what we call performance standards. They're not going into granular detail about how many watts per square foot, how many how many windows you can have in a building, what's the type of material you'll have for the skin of the building, how the roof will be pitched. You'll see those kind of concepts tracking in the ASHRAE suite and the IECC. Very prescriptive. So what I did, I was actually in Geneva when 50,001, on the very day it was released, and I actually have a watermark copy of it from Trevor Weiss, who was the ISO project administrator on that one, and I presented that then to the 2013 International Electrical Energy Conservation Code Committee. And remember that the Department of Energy had many of their Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy partisans there, and while they didn't have a vote, it was very clear that the green agenda, as projected through extremely prescriptive requirements you see in ASHRAE and the IECC, we're not going to welcome any performance standard. There is a part, maybe at some point, that we can do a special teleconference on just the difference between a prescriptive energy code and a performance energy code. So you mentioned Georgia Tech and its involvements in 50,001. At the IECC meetings, however, most of the academic interests, which are aligned with the green interests, voted against, or at least the committee members voted against having a performance standard 50,001. A little bit of irony there I thought I'd point out. And then one other item is it may well be that these other countries need to be more engaged in international standards because our market's smaller. I've complained, I think in part one of our international standards discussion, we pointed out that even though the economic center of gravity is moving eastward, that the United States still has a $17 trillion economy, which is roughly equal to the entire gross domestic product of the European Union. So some of those countries, I give them credit, are doing everything they can, that even though they're smaller economies, I suppose it's a signature of good management to say, look, while we may not have a large economy, we'll just work a little bit harder. We'll collaborate a little bit better. We'll squeeze the best ideas out of our industries. So I would make the observation that it is true. It may be a call to action, and I think that's what Christine is asking here in a very gentle way, that the United States cannot take for granted that it's the size of its economy will necessarily result in the growth of industries. If it doesn't talk among itself better, within itself, better than other nations are. So I know the Germans, for example, I was in Berlin a few years ago for the International Facility Management Standard, and you go to the DIN office, and they standardize everything. They've got all of their key people in the nation focused on every anatomical detail about how something might be made better. So at the risk of, I suppose I should have said, at the risk of talking longer than Christine did, I did want to make those two observations, because your theses about Georgia Tech's involvement, and then finally the disparity between the United States engagement and the rest of the world is what I think is a call to action. So,
Excellent comment, Mike. Really illustrates the complexity of the standards arena.
So, anything, should I go into housekeeping here?
Yes, I think you were going to share with the audience about our plans for next Friday's teleconference, or thereof.
Okay, well, you're running the show from your screen, so you might want to click over to U of M Welcomes ANSI. So, as you might imagine, our Friday afternoon open door teleconference will be preempted by the second time that by this event, ANSI coming in to their leadership coming and helping us present and roll out in detail the advantages and the economic necessity for our industry to allocate resources away from other initiatives and more toward the collaborative action that results in so much advantage to other countries. We want to see greater participation. I often will say, people say, well, how do we participate? Well, the first way you can participate is for every manager that goes on a managerial conference 4 times a year, that manager or director will give up one of his conferences as off-site conferences and give that travel budget, maybe $2,000, to a subject matter expert. That maybe be somebody above him, could be somebody below him on the organization chart. But if you would do that's a good first step. And of course, we need you to do that for about 6 years before something meaningful happens. We think that we now have a platform that will hasten us toward more results. But it still comes down to those, to the C-suite and to the middle directors of the 2,500 colleges and universities in the United States to allocate resources and to get their people to the meetings, and also allow them to participate in the teleconferences, give them the money they need to get the data, share the data, remove restrictions to sharing of the data. We've run into a situation lately where we can't get data because organizations are often afraid to show what they're doing or not doing. So that's how we get that's what participation looks like. And we actually talked about that a couple weeks ago in a teleconference. What does it take to participate? It turns out that depending on what the discipline is, it can vary quite a bit. So I think that's about all I have to say. We're a live stream, as you can see. You can just click us in between 2 and 4. 2 and 4 next week. Oops, looks like Christine's having a little bit of trouble getting. Oh, here she goes. So it's easy enough. We opted to make it easy for everyone. We don't want to do a login. We won't know who you are, but we think it's going to be easier, and we're hoping for an audience, and then of course them to act upon the recommendations of Joe. So, Christine.
Thank you, Mike. And so if you are interested in joining us in person, you can RSVP at my address, chrisfis@umich.edu. And like Mike said, you can just join us live stream. Let's see. And then before we leave, we just wanted to go back and take a look at our front page of our website. because you will notice that every day our blog site features a new image of our education facility, and if any of our attendees would like to send us a high-resolution photo of their campus or facility, they can let us know, and we'll make sure to have permission to post it.
Oh, can I tell
Thank
how?
you very much for.
Christine, can I say how we
Please do, Mike.
picked them? Okay, this is always fun for me. So this is Caltech. This was the alma mater of Jim Duderstadt, one of our former presidents, actually. This is University of Sydney Law School. It's actually a fairly impressive place if you click on the full image. And we are collaborating with some of their mechanical engineers there now in some of the metrics that the Australians are using. We're having a little trouble with the conversions, but we've made some contacts. They seem to be interested. They're following what we're doing from Australia, so we're happy about that. Kentucky, of course, this is the alma mater of Jim Pauley, who was actually a former CEO of, or he was, I think he was one of the, he might have been president of ANSI just only a couple of years ago. So University of Kentucky is a great place, and so is Jim. So this is how we pick these images, folks, and feel free to make some recommendations. So I don't have anything else to say, Christine. I'm very happy with our result today. Thank you very much for I know it took a fair amount of time to get into that research.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for everyone who was able to view our weekly focused teleconference today, September 18th. We hope you can join us for our special ANSI presentation on September 25th, as well as any of our future weekly teleconferences. You can always access them on our video blog. Of course, you are welcome to join us live, usually at 2 o'clock on a Friday, Eastern Standard Time. Thank you so much.